Charleston County is now under a state of emergency.
I would beg everyone, stay off the road until this passes.
You felt like you were shut off from everything else.
Every storm has a story.
It was scary. I didn't know what I was going to do.
And many more have yet to be written.
We never really know exactly where that track's going to be.
From each hurricane's beginning, thousands of miles across the Atlantic.
But the one that's really caught our eye is right out here.
To their dramatic end on our shores.
We're watching this area really closely.
We want to make sure everybody stays safe, and that's why we're on the air.
Storm Team 2 is here to guide you as hurricanes become stronger. Their threats far greater.
Let's talk tropics now. A lot is going on.
The costs more dire.
I just never thought that it was going to be like this here.
This is Storm Team 2, Inside the Storm, from start to finish.
Hello and welcome to Storm Team 2's 2025 Hurricane Special, Inside the Storm, Start to Finish. I'm Storm Team 2 Chief Meteorologist Rob Fowler, joined by the rest of our team, Jed Kristoff, Grace Lau, and Brant Beckman. Our job as meteorologists relies on us looking forward, predicting what the future will hold. Over the next half hour, we want to do the exact opposite, turn back the clock and examine a hurricane from devastating landfall back to its initial formation days before and thousands of miles away.
And by taking this journey backwards in time, we hope to better understand exactly how these storms intensify, highlight how we forecast their impacts, and hopefully lead us to more effectively prepare for the upcoming hurricane season.
Every storm, even ones like most recently Helene, start out as small as a whisper, thousands of miles away. As we rewind the clock from devastating landfall to the beginning of a storm, we want to show you how we prepare, forecast, and rebuild.
So during this next half hour, come along as we take you through the entire process of forecasting a hurricane from start to finish. You'll see the cutting edge technology we use, the partnerships that help keep our communities safe, and the steps we take to ensure you're prepared for whatever the 2025 hurricane season might bring.
There are a few storms which become a benchmark in time, an everlasting memory, and part of the fabric of a specific community. Hurricane Hugo was that for us. Hurricane Andrew for South Florida, Hurricane Camille for the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Hurricane Helene from last year joins that group. It was a storm which broke many of the rules and reminded us that hurricanes are not just coastal storms. The impacts are far-reaching, and those impacts are still being felt today. We now relive Helene.
Sounded like a bomb went off. Nothing like anything I'd ever been in.
This is Chesney, South Carolina today, some 8 months removed from Hurricane Helene's visit in late September of last year. Chesney is hundreds of miles from the normal hurricane breeding grounds, but the damage still in plain sight would rival anything along the coast. They know tornadoes here, not hurricanes.
No, I've been through some tornadoes, but nothing like this.
Kelly Lau probably knows a bit more about all kinds of weather than some of her neighbors, having a daughter who just happens to be one of our Storm Team 2 meteorologists.
We'll back up to that, you telling me that it was coming.
A recent drive through town with Grace at the wheel brought back so many memories.
That was our old parsonage. Sad.
Of how the mindset went from we may get a day or two off from school to days and weeks without power and essential supplies.
Y'all had no power
for 10 days. Man, I don't want to do that again.
Help came after the storm, including 8 units you filled here in the Lowcountry with everything from diapers to grills. But the emotional toll was great. Reliving those days after the storm brings back stories of a community which felt cut off from the rest of the world.
I've never had to stand in line and wait to get free water and propane tank, filled up because I needed to feed my family. We all cleaned out our freezer because the meat was going bad, and so we were cooking, steaks and salmon and everything we had, and just feeding the community.
The stats on Helene were staggering. Some 250 deaths, 26 in South Carolina, close to $79 billion in damage, dozens of confirmed tornadoes, including several right here in the Lowcountry. It was hard to escape the wrath of Helene.
We're just not prepared for it here,
We know South Carolina was impacted greatly, but western North Carolina really took it on the chin. A shift in the track of Helene brought not just high winds, but rainfall which would rival any landfalling hurricane along the coast. This is Chimney Rock today. The landscape was definitely changed, as was the mindset about the next storm.
Oh, it's hurricane season. We've got to get prepared now because before we would have never.
Unfortunately, storms like Helene may become more commonplace with more people in harm's way and more people impacted, even well outside of what we normally consider the danger zone. Meanwhile, back in Chesney, Randy Henderson just got back into his house. He had lived with his daughter since the storm. He knows he is lucky.
Everybody's helped out. I can't say it enough. Just friends and family. That's who you got in this old world. That's who you got.
Helene will most likely never be forgotten, and there's a good chance this storm will be studied time and time again for its inland path and its behavior far removed from what is normally its main energy source, warm water. Not every storm is Helene, and it does matter where a storm sets up. And that's where meteorologist Jed Kristoff takes us right now.
Helene brought historic flooding, damaging winds, and even tornadoes to parts of the Carolinas. But of course, not every storm unfolds the same way. And in every situation, minor details matter. For example, there would be a drastic difference for vulnerable downtown Charleston if a hurricane made landfall on Kiowa, Folly, or even Morris Island compared to Sullivan's Island. Today, I break down what happens at landfall and why no two storms are ever alike. When a hurricane nears landfall, its intensity and exact track are critical in determining what impacts an area may see. Take Hurricane Helene. Its quick movement, large size, the fully saturated soils ahead of time, and terrain-enhanced rainfall caused unprecedented freshwater flash flooding across western North Carolina, some 250 miles away from the coast. By contrast, Hurricane Florence in 2018 came to a halt offshore, maximizing inland flooding closer to the coast, while the Appalachians only received a few inches. You might remember Hurricane Matthew. It also brought inland flooding to the Carolinas, but the storm surge and winds were the biggest impact. Ron Morales at the National Weather Service tells us more.
Extra water on top of the normal ocean level, if you will, or what we worry about is how much and when is it going to happen and where. If it happens at a low tide, the impacts will be a little bit lower. If it happens at a high tide, they'll be higher.
When forecasting for the low country, no storm is the same. Therefore, Storm Team 2 has to focus on different variables like where the right side of the storm sets up. That side is usually the most dangerous, with stronger winds, heavier rain, more storm surge, and a higher tornado risk too. Tropical Storm Debbie was a great example of this. You know, it honestly has a pretty decent signature here as well. It took this small, what used to be just a very small creek, into what looks like a raging river right now. And of course, examining one of the strongest storms to ever hit the South Carolina coast, Hurricane Hugo in 1989. No other storm has ever topped the 12.52 feet recorded at the tidal gauge in the Charleston Harbor. Hugo's landfall on Sullivan's Island spared downtown Charleston an even worse fate.
Had Hugo made landfall just a few miles south of, say, Folly or whatever, it would have produced significantly higher winds and higher storm surge values.
You may have experienced no issues whatsoever with a recent storm that moved through the low country, but that does not mean you won't with the next one. It only takes one storm to make it a bad season. Our partnership with our local National Weather Service office, local emergency managers, and first responders like the Coast Guard ensures that you get timely alerts when a storm threatens. We are your trusted voice, delivering clear, specific forecasts and updates. Not every storm will mirror Helene, Hugo, or any other, but everyone demands respect. Check your flood zone and get our Hurricane Ready Guide at counton2.com. Storm Team 2 has you covered.
How do we predict a storm's path when it's more than a few days away? Critical data from the NOAA hurricane hunters as they fly through the eye of the storm, and long-range forecasts that can be complex. Next.
Helene devastated the upstate and western North Carolina, and help is still desperately needed. If you'd like to donate to the American Red Cross, scan the QR code on your screen. Forecasting a storm 2 to 3 days out. When you're that close to landfall, the timing is critical for knowing how fast the storm is going, the intensity, and of course, pinpointing the landfall. To get that information, we go here.
It can get very intense up there. storm can change. You know, it could be fairly smooth on one pass, it could be really rough on another.
Incredible turbulence. We're all right, we're all right. Things flying around in the aircraft.
There goes the signs. There goes the fence. Holy cow.
Great sense of pride to fly with the people I fly with, knowing that what we're doing is helping those on the ground.
If there's ever any storm threatening land, threatening lives and property, we're going to be out there.
Flying into the eye of a storm is not an easy task, but a necessary mission for the NOAA hurricane hunters.
Everyone on board is laser focused, no matter how tumultuous the environment may be.
I had the opportunity to visit the NOAA Aircraft Operations Center to speak with experts.
I am the one that helps us navigate through the storms.
Like meteorologist Sophia DeSolo about this upcoming season.
We fly into the hurricanes and we're collecting data that we wouldn't have otherwise. So we have several radars that collect data and also our dropsondes. Our dropsondes collect temperature, dew point, pressure, and wind speed as they fall down to the surface. They have a parachute.
The data they collect is crucial for the few days leading up to a possible landfall.
We put ourselves in risk in the sense that we fly into these hurricanes, but we have major respect for the intensity of these storms.
Andrew Reeves, the pilot of the P3, tells me more.
How do you get data where there's no weather stations, right? And so it's like we have to go out there for us to get the data to the NHC, National Hurricane Center, so they can update their forecast, protecting property and lives. You know, that's what we're here for.
All of this data combines into models we use and you may recognize, like the cone of uncertainty, to create a complex forecast.
All of that is getting fed into the operational forecast models that predict where the storm is going to go and how strong it's going to be when it gets there. And so the more data, the more accurate data we can collect up in the storm, the better those forecasts are going to be, and the earlier we can warn people to get out of the way.
With the few days ahead of landfall, this is a partnership in forecasting to give you the latest and up-to-date information during a window of time you may need to make a life-saving decision.
Those are what emergency managers are using to issue evacuation orders. It's what people at home are watching so closely to figure out, okay, the storm's coming my way, I have a couple of days to prepare my home, I have a couple days to evacuate, I have a couple days to help my neighbors and make sure that they are prepared for the storm.
There are numerous passes through a storm, to several trained meteorologists on board, and continuous data flowing from instrumentation to create, maintain, or even adjust the most accurate forecast.
It's all about protecting life and property, and we play our part in that. The Hurricane Center plays their part, the researchers play their part, and without that collaboration, without that teamwork, all of this really comes crashing down, and people don't have that warning that they need to, again, keep themselves and their communities safe.
And what sparks all of this is put into motion just a few days before, when we are several days out from a landfall.
Forecasting a tropical system 5 to 7 days out is difficult, but you're already receiving information from several different sources. So pinpointing which sources are truthful and which sources are just looking for your attention, we're going to separate that out. We're going to talk about all the different tools we have available to us and the people you can trust.
Everything is available. The model data, the satellite data, the radar data.
Imagine a room full of different scientists, each of them an expert on hurricanes. Each of them have a slightly different view on what makes a hurricane tick. Now, let's give each scientist brightly colored markers and ask them to draw on a map where they think a hurricane will travel. Now imagine those scientists are actually supercomputers. The result is spaghetti plots.
If anybody were to look at those at each time to try to make decisions, you'd be misled. The Hurricane Center looks at all of that, comes up with their best track, and then makes smaller adjustments through time.
Even with only slightly different personalities, these models can vastly disagree with each other.
It may, over 7 days, it may come back to that solution, but there's no way you would know that. They don't make a move on that final determination of direction, speed, and intensity of that storm until they get the aircraft data in.
What if the water is warmer than forecasted? Maybe colder. The shear is stronger, weaker. Maybe the high pressure steering the whole hurricane is stronger than forecasted. These little tweaks are purposefully put into these computers.
The models are getting much better, but that's still a big challenge for our science.
The cone is also another powerful tool that uses similar data input. It is not a reflection of the damage path, only the center of the hurricane. Damage can occur far outside the cone's forecasted path.
Our mission at the National Weather Service is not to get ratings, is to not have accolades and get pat on the back. Our mission is protection of life and property, number one. And our media partners combine that with your mission, which is to get the word out.
Storm Team 2 lives and works in the same communities that we forecast for. We're your neighbors. We have a vested interest in giving you the best information available when we know it. We take great pride in empowering our communities with information to make informed choices.
Coming up, how do we spot the potential for a hurricane before it even forms? Satellites and radar have changed over the years from Hugo to Helene, and forecasts have come a long way. We discuss in more detail next.
Satellites, weather radar are two of the main tools we use during daily weather forecasts, but even more important when it comes to extreme weather events like tropical storms and hurricanes. The changes in our weather tools over these many years has helped improve our forecast, but we know there will always be a curveball, as each and every storm does have its own identity. That can be the hardest part of what we do.
April 1st, 1960, the world's first weather satellite was launched. Tyros 1, as it was called, only lasted 78 days. The photos were not of great quality, but the door had been opened to a whole new world of weather forecasting. We needed that satellite perspective during Hurricane Hugo. The storm grew to some 600 miles in diameter on the Thursday before landfall. Can you imagine how hard it would be to forecast without this view from above? I think we know the answer. All you have to do is go back to September of 1900. It was the Great Galveston Hurricane. Some 12,000 people may have perished in the storm. Many did not know what was coming. While the satellites are extremely important, what happened in World War II may have been just as vital. On a dare, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Duckworth, using an AT-6 Texan aircraft, flew into a hurricane. And with this, the Hurricane Hunter program was born.
Year after year, no matter how strong a storm is, no matter where the storms are going, we are at the ready to go out, fly, collect this data, provide it to the Hurricane Center to feed those forecasts.
I have had the opportunity of flying into a hurricane. For me, it was Hurricane Sandy in 2012. It was a bumpy ride, but gave me an even greater appreciation for what these men and women take on every season. The most important part, the technology and tools are getting better.
So this is a Black Swift S0. This is one of our uncrewed aerial systems. And the goal of these is that they can fly down a lot lower into the storm than we can safely get into and collect data that we otherwise wouldn't be able to get.
We have certainly come a long way in satellites, radar, and computer modeling. For someone who has spent 43 years in the weather business, I've seen so many life-saving advancements. For instance, back in 1989, we showed you a 72-hour forecast track. Today, we can show you a 5-day track with an even lower margin of error. Hurricane tracking is still a work in progress, but we are making strides.
Trying to focus on being a calm, trusted voice in a world that is increasingly filled with hyperbole. There is indication that that is what the public wants more and more. Stay the course with being this calm, trusted voice in a storm.
Advancements in technology will continue, which is imperative, since more and more people are moving into areas where hurricane season becomes a way of life. We know the lure of water is great, and many of us understand the risk of living near hurricane breeding grounds.
Coming up, what you need to know this 2025 hurricane season.
That wraps up our 2025 Hurricane Special, Inside the Storm, Start to Finish. Thank you for joining us over this past half hour. As we move through this hurricane season, remember, it only takes one storm to make it a bad year. But with Storm Team 2 by your side, you'll be ready to weather any challenge. Stay safe, and we'll guide you through this hurricane season.